Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
How are you today?
I'm doing great. It's a
Ex-
pleasure to be with you, Dr. Newman. It really
Thank
is.
you so much. I really appreciate that. May I
Mhm.
ask you to please tell us your name?
My name is Jerome Espy, Sr., and I was born in Kalamazoo, Michigan, but I live in the Metro Detroit area now.
Excellent. Very nice name. Thank you very much. And will you share a little bit about yourself? Anything you feel comfortable sharing?
Sure, sure. Again, I know I just said this, but I'm really honored to be able to talk with you. I am a, obviously, I'm a Black man. I know you can see that, but
No, I cannot see that.
Well, yeah, African American male. So I grew up in Kalamazoo. My parents worked in the mental health, and so I was kind of didn't work around that, but I was exposed to that early, and just really had loving parents, and really formed who I am today, and how I approach my parenting, how I approach mentoring, how I approach what I ended up going into, and what I do to this day.
Yes.
Now I just crossed I'm at 13 years of having my own business.
Okay.
After working in an industry and several industries kind of leading up to that. I began working at Western Michigan University in my professional career. But at the same time, even younger, I've had this voice since I was 12 years old.
It's a beautiful voice. It's a very beautiful voice.
Thank you. So I started out in radio at 12.
Okay.
And so I started out actually helping a pastor at the time produce his weekly program. But then I had the opportunity through an Explorer program to actually get into a radio station and to begin working on the air and learning the intricacies of production. Had a really great mentor at the time. His name was Gary Outlaw. And he was an online personality, had the voice and all of the hey, we're here, all that type of thing. But I learned a lot from him, and this is at a very young age. That led me into the space. I've always been engaged in radio and television and all types of different things, but it led me down the path of getting involved in media. I've always loved just the whole process of TV, process of production and radio and exposure and all of that type of thing. So I did do a lot. I worked in television. I started out in working in radio, as I talked about, but then fast forward a little bit, I worked in radio at radio stations. And then also there was a time I was telling my daughter the other day, I have a son and a daughter, but I was telling them the other day, reminding them that when they were very, very young, on a typical Saturday, I worked three full-time jobs. And so I was at work for 16, 17 hours a day at that time, because I was trying to launch a career, trying to get into the space. So I would go from one job to the next one, to the next one, with all the idea of advancing my career. And so it was, I didn't consider it tough at the time. I considered it the dues I had to pay to get into to do what I wanted to do. So I just really just enjoyed. I learned everything I possibly could. When I was working at the radio stations, I had the three jobs. I remember there was the radio station offered me a full-time job, and it's like, we've never offered this much to anyone, but we're going to give you $13,000 a year.
Wow.
And I was like, oh, that's interesting. I said, I have to do some harder work. I've got to find something else to do. Yeah. But I got an opportunity to work for an NBC affiliate, and I'm from Detroit, here in Detroit. And I went into the interview. I was just so excited to get the interview. And I did the interview, and I wasn't quite sure, as we go into an interview, we're not quite sure, how is this going? Mm-hmm. And I wasn't quite sure, but it was a African-American woman. Her name is Daphne Hughes, who is a dear friend of mine to this day. At the time, I left that interview thinking like, okay, I may have to reconsider. but the interview went better than I thought, and she hired me in. And she called me and asked, hey, so we want to offer you a position. I was like, great. And I got that position, but I never bothered to ask how much I was going to make. I never asked. So I started, it was as a production assistant at this NBC affiliate. And so it started out at $4.25 an hour.
Woo, you were enrolled in no.
I was dedicated. I was dedicated, Dr. Newman. And so I took a breath, it kind of knocked me back a little bit. I was like, But I was like, okay, well, I'm going to have to put my time in. I'm going to have to do what I have to do. And I think that's partially what is, I won't say it doesn't exist at all, but I think it's lacking a little bit of putting in the time that you need to kind of build your career, advance your career. So I talk to my children about, and I'm a person of faith, and so I talk to them a lot about that God blesses steps. He blesses steps. He blesses when we make an action, we take an action, we continue to move forward. And so that was one of my first steps to get into this space. But very quickly from going from 425 an hour, I put in the hard work, and within 3 months, actually, I got a promotion, and then 3 months later, I got another promotion, and then within 6 months, I was even higher up, and I just brought all of the experience that I had as a young person into these new roles, and just really was just engulfed in, this is what I want to do. This is how I have to get into it, and all that type of thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No. I was going to say it's a beautiful journey. So where did it eventually end? What happened after you left that station? What did you do next?
Well, after that station, actually from that station, I went to New Orleans. So I rose up at the NBC affiliate, then I went to New Orleans, got an offer down there, and they laid out the red carpet for me. And then while I was there for about a year and a half, and then Detroit called me back again and said, "Hey, we want to offer you this," and so it almost doubled my salary to come back to Detroit, which was great. If you come and offer me twice my salary, I'm going to give a hard listen to that. You know what I'm saying? So it was great. But yeah, so I started out in that radio, television, and print, because in Kalamazoo with a friend of mine, we had started a newspaper. So I owned the newspaper as well, and kind of wrote that for quite a while, and learned about the process of sustaining a media outlet, and the challenges of trying to get funding as a outlet of color, because there are many times what we discovered is that we could get a one-time ad from a company, but they didn't see the value in advertising in our community to give us okay, we've got this $20,000, we're going to invest some of a sustaining amount of money in this publication. We just didn't. It was quite a battle, but it was an education process as well. But so I went from the radio and television, and then I got into public relations. So I went from radio, television, print to work at a company, to work at companies. I worked at one of the largest cable companies in the world now, and so I rose up the ranks there as to a vice president, a regional vice president at that company. And to give you an idea, they're represented by a peacock. That's to not name them specifically, but a great experience there as well. So I was over a 6-state area as vice president of communications for them, doing public relations, doing all types of things related to that, marketing, the very beginnings of social media and that type of thing. And so I worked there for 7 years, and then actually went to a public relations agency from there. Agency where at the communications company, I was in one particular thing, but had a great amount of success there. But then going over and working for an agency, at one point I had 9 different clients that I was responsible for. Had a team I was managing and making sure the work got done, but across all kinds of industries, restaurants, publishers, authors. And so while I was working at that corporation, Fortune 100 company, and I was over a 5-state area. Oh, you shook your head. Am I okay?
No, you're all right. I hope I didn't shake my head, but yes, you're fine.
Okay. So while I was at that company, I was over a 5-state area, and handling all of the marketing and public relations for that area, and it was going very well. I really enjoyed that job, and it kind of pulled together everything that I had done over my years, all the way from starting out at 12 years old on the radio and coming on up and doing all of that work. So it was really rewarding. At that time, that company we had 6 divisions across the country, And so I was the VP of one of those divisions. Eventually, the company eliminated 2 of the divisions and went down to 4, and ours was one of those divisions. So here, where I live in Michigan, 350 people just immediately, we all got dispersed, lost the jobs. And, then we had to really kind of make a decision. Okay, so what do I do now? So that was a great learning experience for me. And it sparked in me the idea of, okay, I need to have a little more security. And so that's when I really made the decision I'm going to go ahead and start my own business. So I had this experience on both sides of the microphone, producing, being on air, being in radio, being on television, all of that. And then going into working for public relations agencies and taking that experience. And so I made the decision that I was going to start my own public relations firm. And so starting out in public relations, helping people to establish themselves. I always say that, our specialty is helping small to medium-sized businesses grow while also maintaining their business. So the small to medium-sized business is caught in the business of keeping the doors open. What we're going through now aside, but really teaching small businesses, medium-sized businesses, how to prepare for the pivot. That's one of my constant things. How to prepare for the pivot. How to put your business into a place and you can't foresee everything. No one could foresee what we're going through now. But if you prepare for the pivot before you need to, when something comes up, you're better able to navigate it. So that became I had a few restaurant clients, engineering firms, a couple of authors, and all kinds of businesses. So it really built on what I was doing at the public relations agency, where I had all of those clients I was dealing with in different industries and navigating all of that. So I built up a lot of relationships. And then once I started the business, I began to get clients not only in my state, but then across the country too. So I was able to get national placements and that kind of thing. And so it's been quite a journey, but I'm glad. I mean, on paper, it looks like I've been all over the place. So my mother used to really get on me, say, boy, what are you doing? What you gonna do? But it all makes sense now. It all makes sense now. And so it's really rewarding. The couple of things is that I've learned that it's important to know what you're going to make, but it's to really understand that you have to start somewhere and then work hard, and then that will eventually pay off. We have to have patience in everything that we do, particularly as I believe, as people of color, we have to have patience, but then also look forward and not always depend upon others, because there are things that are outside of our control. But if we are patient and we have to put a strategy in place and we work that plan, then we can grow and move into a place where we have a modicum of independence and self-reliance in a world that seems very helter-skelter and so many things going on.
Absolutely. So as we look at where we are right now, it seems like to me that the media has been a source of good information and bad information, considering its relationship to social media. So what are your thoughts about the media and where we are now in this real digital age, and where you think media is going?
Sure. One of the things that I would tell, and I still tell people, is that when you're dealing with the media, is to always tell the truth. Never try to I would say snooker or get around the truth. But what's happened over the last 5 years has somewhat put all of that on its ear. Many people are now rewarded for lying, for telling half truths or not truth at all. So I think that has hurt a lot of people. The same standards are still there somewhere in the background, but the behavior of many people has led to a space where the media in some aspects is not trusted, but then we can't really trust everything that people are saying. So to me, it's almost like there's been a loss of shame. Some people just would not lie. They were just like, okay, well, I have to be truthful, where some of that has gone out of the window. But I think that there are still opportunities for truth in the media, truth for any business that's coming forward and trying to grow themselves. But certainly there's been a shift in how businesses grow. and how a business that has been established. And we've seen, I drove up and down our area over the last couple of days. I was going to a men's clothing store as a perfect example. Store's been open for 25 years. Went by there, it's closed. It's gone. They had an established audience. And so I think that when I talk about the power of the pivot, that we have to be, businesses have to be able to pivot. And we're never going to know. Life is the same. Life is the same way. We never know what's going to happen, but we have to be prepared to pivot. So there's power in the pivot, power in being prepared for it and being agile. So when we talk about the media has kind of shifted their focus. Many outlets now, in whatever city you live in the country, there were probably 10 years ago, there were probably, let's say, for example, 6, 7, 10 publications or outlets. Now there's been a consolidation. I think about the area that I live in Detroit. There's one group of publications that covered more of the neighborhood news. You had the larger publications and you had the smaller ones. What has happened is that there's been a consolidation. So there were like 8 in our suburbs, and now there's one entity running all of that, and then one staff handling all of those publications. So from a promotion standpoint, it's easier for me to go to one publication and say, okay, so this is for this suburb, this is for this suburb, and getting things placed. But if you talk about the integrity of the media, there's challenges there. They will do more. Where when I started out doing this, the idea of paying to be placed on the media was unheard of. Where now, I was just talking to an outlet last week that they have a program that's on just before noon, that the only way to get on there is to pay. And so it takes the integrity out of what journalism is supposed to be. It's supposed to be finding truth and revealing things that are out there and righting wrongs. Where there's been a shift towards, to try to maintain a business, there's been a shift towards, okay, we need to get pay. We need to have a paid segment. You may see this in your local newspaper, for example. Many newspapers, the New York Times tried this years ago. They tried to do a pay model online. They tried to get people to subscribe, and people were like, "No, I can get this for free." What you're seeing now, I'd say over the last year, due to what's happened with the pandemic, what's happened in a lot of things, that these publications are now, you can see this amount of content, but if you want to see the really good stories, you've got to subscribe online. You've got to subscribe. And so they don't give you that option any longer. And so a lot of it is driven by a revenue model for the media outlets. They've got to make money if they're going to stay in business. And there are many outlets that have gone out of business because they just didn't figure out, how do we get paid, particularly now. A business, take a restaurant that's down the street. A year and a half ago, they could just put an ad online, or they could run Facebook's ads or have a digital strategy that would drive people to their business. But over the last year, many businesses just don't even exist. Or they exist in a way that is virtual and pickup or delivery, or all those kinds of things. And so the smaller to medium-sized businesses have had a really difficult time, particularly if they were caught up in just running the day-to-day and not able to strategically look ahead and figure out, what do I do next? What do I do if? That's a question that is always in any business person's mind. What do I do if? What do I do if there's a change in demographics? What do I do if there's a tragedy like a pandemic or something like that? How do I make that shift into something that's going to benefit and sustain my business? So the power of the pivot is so important for businesses of any side.
Yeah. I think that at least to talk about the media a little bit, so you have seen a change in the media in a way that is almost shocking to the system. If you were a child of the 70s or in that time frame, you had 3 broadcast channels. You had your local newspaper. You may or may not have gotten a national newspaper. But now information is available everywhere and from all kinds of resources. It's not necessarily news media. And there's been almost an attack on the media because we
Yeah.
heard a lot about fake news and, that these people weren't telling the whole story. And so, people are trying to readdress that, but the media has changed a lot. People have become famous through YouTube. They put a YouTube thing out there and just, so the way we get our news has changed a lot. And how much of that is factual, or at least what we think about as factual, so if somebody says today is Sunday and it's 1:30 in the afternoon, we can assume that might be a fact, but the person might be in Japan, or the person may be in so the way that the news is put out there, you're not sure whether you're getting accurate information or not. There's a lot of talk about this pandemic and whether the numbers that we see are correct. That 500,000 more people died. How many people contracted it? Why is it so pervasive in the United States versus other places, or the other countries not telling us their news? So it's all of these things are kind of framing the news in a way that gives us either a sense to make us feel secure or feel insecure, and depending on what the intention is of the person providing the information.
And then the other thing is that really, if we talk back to the 70s, and I'm old enough to remember this, is that you could, in a way, people trusted the outlet. Absolutely. They trusted what was put out there. And they also, if you wanted to put your story out, you had to depend on an outlet or someone coming to you to tell your story. Right. But with the advent of these devices, now, Dr. Newman, you're a reporter, I'm a reporter, my neighbor's a reporter, my child is a reporter. Everyone at any time can click a live button and you're on.
Yep.
And so in some ways, it's hurt the quality of the content as well. So if anybody can put anything out there, then who's the quality checker, or who's the fact checker? Absolutely. Who checks that information that's being put out there? And sadly, no one checks it. Right. No one. And so that's why things can go viral. Being viral doesn't mean it's right. That's another thing that I always tell people. Just because you go viral doesn't mean that the information is correct. Doesn't mean that it's helpful. It just means it went viral. It just means that whatever you put out spread like wildfire, but it doesn't give it validity. And so that's one of the other big challenges as well.
I think a lot of people think it does give it validity. But I want to ask this question. So one of the things that the media has had a role in, and that is how healthcare is portrayed. So there's a lot of pushback, or maybe the word is dissension, about the vaccine, right? So we just saw Johnson & Johnson have a little issue with theirs. AstraZeneca had a little issue. And so people, I think, as you said earlier correctly, people used to trust the media that the information you were getting was correct. It's from a viable source. It had been fact checked. It was good. Now we don't know. And as people of color, Black people, brown people, we're not exactly sure what we're being told, how accurate it is. So a lot of people have gone on their soapboxes and says, hey, well, you need to take the vaccine. You need to get the vaccine. And that's a very important thing to say, but the messenger is not always correct. The message is not always received the way you intended. And people have long memories like elephants. We know historically how healthcare has been for Black and brown communities. Black women still die at a greater rate than non-Black women in pregnancy and childbirth. So here we are in this pandemic now, and there are people who are saying they absolutely are not going to get the vaccine, or they're going to wait and see. How does the news take responsibility for what's out there in the space of good information, and that piece about what we know historically has happened to people, Black and brown people in the healthcare space?
I think that the brave outlets, and it's sad that I even have to call them brave, are the ones that are checking themselves and saying, and I used to work in TV. So you may have heard the old phrase of, if it bleeds, it leads.
Yeah, absolutely.
So in the times when I was working in TV, at night, I'm in Detroit. So, I mean, there is unfortunately, it's less than it used to be, but there was a lot of crime, So on a nightly basis, on the police scanners, I may hear there's a shooting or some sort of, vicious crime. And at that time, we wouldn't even necessarily, if someone died, that's a different situation. But if it was a violent crime, we wouldn't necessarily roll a reporter out there unless it was a senior citizen or if it was a child.
Mhm.
So anyone in the margins just wasn't, it just didn't rise to the level of coverage. And I'm not excusing that, but I mean, that was just the reality. And so and if you talk too about, you mentioned African American women and women of color, is that this is a whole nother discussion we could have, Dr. Newman, but just talking about just the pain, women being believed that the pain that they are feeling is real. And so for many, physicians, just the healthcare in general, it's like, oh, for some reason, like we know that Black and brown women are super women, but it doesn't mean that they don't feel pain.
Absolutely.
And so they need to be believed. Women need to be believed on so many levels, but one at the top is healthcare. And so then if we talk to like, okay, just trust me, the physicians, those in leadership around the country, talking about the vaccine, talking about the virus, and they aren't saying directly, but in a sense, they're saying, just trust me, just trust me. But for our people, why would I trust you? Why would I trust you? And so that's a hurdle that has to be jumped to get to a level where the government wants to get. They just say, hey, all of these are available, so I'm sure everyone's going to do it. Not necessarily. Or we're going to open the schools so you all can come on back.
Right.
Many of our people are like, no, not so fast. Not so fast.
That's
yeah.
right.
And so the media has a responsibility to tell the truth, and then also not just follow the part, and I'll use the term party line just loosely, but not just follow, I don't care what side of the aisle you're on, but just follow whatever's been said. They have to be more critical. And so you really have to put a genie back in the bottle a little bit, that while they're trying to sustain themselves financially, they've got to make a decision. Okay, we're supposed to be dedicated to truth and getting correct information out here. So they really have to go back to the place of really seeking out real stories and not just trying to get clicks, views, mentions, those kinds of things. And so that's one of the detriments to social media. From a media standpoint, they write their headlines to get more eyeballs, to get more people. And the headline sometimes is way off from what is actually even in the story. So they're just they've got it all figured out on how to get you to click. And then so it's you have a lot to unravel to get back to a place where it's complete truth that's being put out there. And it may not even have been complete truth that you and I would have saw in the 70s and 80s. That may not even been the full truth, but just get closer to something that is more helpful than harmful.
Exactly. And we do know that, Tuskegee Airmen and syphilis is not a fake news story. We do know that sterilization of Black women is not a fake news story. The problem is that when you have something as broad and massive as COVID is, there is a lot, because the way it was originally told, people with a lot of comorbidities, such as Black and brown people, were dying and were most susceptible to this virus. And while that might be true, the spin that puts on it is, I, as a white person or non-Black or brown person, don't have to worry about this virus as much. And the fact that that's out there causes dissension in how people see things. Then the fact that, why do Black and brown communities have comorbidities? Well, there's a lot of arguments about why, but a lot of it is finger pointing, right? So you eat too much, you eat you eat unhealthy, whatever it is. So it's easy to malign a group that eventually that way of deteriorating a group eventually spreads to a broader audience, because now, people don't want to wear a mask, it's against my civil rights to put on a mask, or I don't want to get the virus or the vaccine because, I feel some kind of view that this is something that's only in the Black and brown communities, where that's not correct. This virus is all over the world. They've got every variant that you can met. If you've got a country, it's probably got a variant of this vaccine, but the way they tell the story, this is just in this community or affecting these people or something like that. So I understand that you also have had an experience with healthcare. Can you talk a little bit about that and what was the outcome and how that affected you?
Sure. I'm happy to. So actually in 2018, December 12th of 2018, gratefully, I received a kidney. And so I was a diabetes and high blood pressure were things that led to my having to get a kidney. And so I was before that I was on dialysis for 2 years
Mhm.
and went through that all of that declining health, and a lot of it was you talked a little bit about eating and that sort of thing. It's a horrible thing to go through, but part of it was because as far as eating, I did some of what I was supposed to do, but not all of what I was supposed to do.
Mhm.
And so I take partial responsibility for that. There's not a history of diabetes or high blood pressure there is, but of diabetes in my family. But I had that, and so I went to an event. While I was on dialysis for 2 years, I went to an event in May of 2018 and was reintroduced to a friend of mine, someone I hadn't talked to in like 3 years. And for anyone that's ever been on dialysis or had a chronic illness, you don't always feel the best.
Mhm.
But on this particular day, I wasn't feeling really well, and my wife and I went to this event, and we at first we weren't going to go to this event,
Mhm.
but we decided we were going to go. So we were seated, and then this friend of mine that I hadn't seen in 3 years sat down next to us, and we began to talk. And he was asking how you been doing. And so I was like, well, I'm on dialysis. I'm waiting for a kidney. All of that. And without a beat, he said, if I'm a match, I'd give you a kidney. And so it was just like that. And so one of the things I always say too is that you never know who you're meeting. You never know who you're interacting with. You never know what's going to happen to you because of the interactions you have. And so really, to his credit, that next Monday, this event happened on a Saturday, that next Monday, he went and began the testing process to become a donor for me. And so everything worked out. It was a bunch of tests. I had to lose 50 pounds, which I did. And then it ended up on, as I said, December 12th, 2018, that I was able to receive a kidney from him. His name is Tiger, and he's a blessing. I still get to talk to him. So I had a living donor, and my donor is white. And so that's another myth dispelled, is that a lot of times people think, okay, I need a kidney, I need an organ, it has to be the same blood type. It doesn't even have to necessarily be the same blood type, but they have to be the same race. It doesn't. And so it was a blessing to receive that. And since then, I'm on the board of an organization called MOTEP, which is a Minority Organ Tissue Transplant Education Program. And
Mhm.
so we go about trying to encourage people of color to register. This is a Black, Brown, Arabic, just to get registered for a transplant. So really, one of the great things that I've learned throughout this process is that each one of us can save up to 70 people, almost 70 people. So with different organs, corneas, bone marrow, organs, all that time, and all of the things that we can save people with, you don't necessarily have to expire to do. You can do a lot of things even now. So one of the things I am doing is also encouraging everyone to sign up for the donor registry wherever they are, and to really take advantage of that. So I've had a lot of experience with that. There's a whole discussion out there about that people that are that have diabetes, that have high blood pressure, and are in end-stage renal disease, which is very advanced kidney disease, that our people are kind of pushed towards dialysis sooner than others.
Mhm.
And so there's a whole discussion about that when you talk about comorbidities and all those kinds of things. But we do, I'm a big advocate for uh, everyone, but particularly people of color, to sign up for the donor registry and then take responsibility for their health as well, to really be proactive in taking care of themselves. One of the biggest things that led to me to being a kidney recipient is three words: I deserve it. So I had gotten to a place where it was like, I can't control this, but I can control what I put in my mouth. And so even if it was bad for me, I was making bad choices on the food front.
Mhm.
So it's just really important, particularly for people of color, that we take our health seriously, that we understand what we can do, and understand that physicians, medicine, doctors can be a blessing, we do have a history of issues, and that's well noted, but that we can, at the same time, we can be proactive in taking care of ourselves. And then two, physicians in mass are here to help us. And so we can believe them and not necessarily believe the, mistruths and half truths that are out there. There's a lot. Last thing I'll add as far as health is concerned is that I was a part of a effort last year, well, 2 years ago now. I feel like last year was lost altogether, but 2 years ago, it was called Let's Talk. And so it was going out into the communities of color, talking to churches, talking to people of color, and just kind of dispelling myths. There are still churches out there that will tell you that, oh, you can't get into heaven if you don't have all your organs, or so there are a lot of things that we will believe between one another that aren't necessarily fully true. And so we need to get the truth about what's going on and ways that we can help. And whenever we can help, we need to step up and do that and provide facts and figures and information. Some of that has been lost over the last 5 years. People will believe a lie quicker than they will data. And so they don't trust science, but science is still science, and science isn't perfect, but it's better than someone just waking up, having an egg sandwich and telling you something. We need to trust science.
Absolutely. I think that one of the interesting pieces and parts of this is that, as much as we are a part of the larger society, we have been kept out of the larger society for various reasons. And, people have their arguments as to why that is. Black people were prohibited from reading, from voting, from all kinds of other things like that. But I think now, if society as a whole is going to attempt to undo the harm that it has done to Black communities, and I think in a lot of ways other communities, marginalized communities as well, they need to have Black people that are speaking to their communities that are fact warriors, not hyperbole, not generic things, not overblowing or minimizing anything, but we need to have fact warriors. And if the fact warrior is white, and this is unfortunate, but in a lot of ways it's their fault as well, you're going to need to have some way to validate what you're telling us. We aren't believing it just wholesalely. We aren't taking it as verbatim. We need to have someone else who is one of our communities that are intricately involved in our lives. So a lot of times it's a religious figure, sometimes it's a doctor, sometimes it's our parents and our community, but these messages need to get to these groups, and then these groups need to retell that story for those communities, as opposed to counting on a TV commercial or some talking head to say something. We need to have some way to validate that if we're going to undo the stigma, if we're going to get people to, because I think that COVID is a very interesting example. I don't think it's gone. I don't think it's going to be gone in 10 years. I think that viruses and healthcare scares that affect a large group of people are going to continue. And if we are going to save the population, if we are going to save humanity, we need profiteers that are telling us the truth from the way they sit. And when I say profiters, I mean, I'm not talking about people who make money, but I'm talking about people who know what they need to know and that they're capable of telling that story. So I think that's very important. I thank you for sharing your story with you, and congratulations. I'm very happy for you. Very good that you found a good donor and all those things. I do have one question about that though. So
Yes.
How come your doctors didn't put you in a donor program? How come your doctors didn't do more to get you a new kidney if they knew you needed one?
I was there are different stages of kidney disease. And so, chronic kidney disease is kind of the general, you're doing med. I got to the place where it was, and I hate this name, but it's called end stage renal disease. So, I'm a big person believing in keeping our head right, our mindset right. And so if I hear that, okay, I've got end stage renal disease, in its name, it says, okay, this is the end. And so, it's a big thing to fight. But I was with one hospital system, and and my wife has been a great advocate for my health, which you need someone to be there with you too. Absolutely. Particularly if you're going through a chronic illness, because if you're going through a chronic illness, you go to the doctor yourself, you hear bad news. I know for me, I checked out after they said you're going to have to go on dialysis. My mind was like, okay, oh my God, what does this mean? Blah, blah, blah. And she's able to sit there and say, okay, well, what about this? What about that? What about that?
Right.
And so, but I was with a hospital system, and I ended up moving hospital systems because, as I looked at it, well, there should have been some more proactive steps done a lot sooner than me getting to the place where my only option was, well, do you want hemodialysis or do you want peritoneal dialysis? Do you want to do it at home or do you want to do it at the center? And so, once we actually looked at, okay, we moved to another hospital system, and that hospital system was all about, and they've been phenomenal for me. So there were some decisions made. As I said, I know that I could have done some things differently, but at the same time, my doctors were not as proactive at the old hospital system as they could have been.
Yes.
And because I remember even having, I talked about that idea of, okay, the understanding, listening to a patient when they say they have pain or they're having something. And I was having some adverse effects to some medicine that I was taking. And my nephrologist at the time was like, oh, you're not having that. It's okay. I'm like, no, I'm telling you what's going on, And so that mentality is what contributed to me getting to the place where I am. But I'm blessed. I'm doing great now. I really am. But yeah, I do think that listening to patients, in particular patients of color, and just not discounting them if they say something, I think is vitally important, and it can help save lives, and around all types of things. I've even met and talked to different people that when COVID was first coming around, and they would go to the hospital and they say, I'm having this and this and this. It sounds like I have COVID. Mm-hmm. And they would be sent home. Mm-hmm. And so I just think that whole idea of listening to patients, particularly of color, is that we know our bodies. Everyone, we know our bodies and we know what's going on. And so to have someone to hear us and listen to us and to act on that is vitally important.
Absolutely. And I do want to say something, so I occasionally use the word people of color. And to me, that assumes or makes the assumption that white people are not of color. Is not white a color? So I think that people of color is a bit of a misnomer. And that's why I always try to highlight Black and brown, or what community I'm talking about, because we all are of color. What color we are, just because there's more color variation in the Black and brown community, doesn't mean that white people don't have color either, because there's variation in their color schemes as well. So I try to stay away from that word. I just want to put that on the record for me.
I get you.
I understand. I have no judgment about the use of the word. So please. So I want to ask you this. So you talked to us earlier about, the media in your early career. So now you have your own business. Can you talk a little bit about your business? If you will, share the name of your company and how we can get in touch with you if you have a service that we need. But can you talk a little bit about why you started the business and what are the challenges that you see with entrepreneurs going forward?
Sure. Well, I started, the name of my business is Infinite Communications. Infinite Communications. It's spelled a little differently. It's Infinit Communications. Okay. The reason I started was because of what I was experiencing just in the workplace, and I wanted to have more control over what clients I worked with, how I operated, the decisions that were made, the integrity that went into what I was doing, and I wasn't getting all of that working for someone else. So I wanted to have more control of my destiny. Now, when I first started out, my mindset was, well, I'm not gonna work over here. I'm gonna go over here and work for myself, and I'm gonna control. And it still holds true. But once you start a business, you start understanding that in many ways you're gonna work harder than you did when you're working for someone else. For example, you had payroll, the payroll department at your company if you work for someone else. But when you work for yourself, you are your payroll company. You are your payroll. You're your advertising. You are your negotiator. You're everything. You wear every hat that there is. So it was quite eye-opening getting into the business, and then also you become the salesperson, because then you have to go out and get business. And so it's been quite a journey. But like I say, this is my 13th year, and so I've had different ups and downs. Like, so a great piece was when I went through my health challenge, I've had some people that work for me as independent contractors, but So I'm one of the ones that's driving all of the money in. So if I get sick, then anyone that's working with me is out as well. So any entrepreneur has to think there's key man insurance. There's all kinds of things that you can put in place to protect your income, protect the income of your employees or your contractors and all that type of thing. But we have to think beyond, I can't stand this job, I'm gonna go start my own business. That's not necessarily a reason to jump out there. The other thing that I had done at the time when I was starting the business was I built up some money to live off of.
Mm-hmm.
I built up a cushion. And so I used all of the resources that I had at the company I was working at the time to build up what I needed to step out. I didn't just go in and say, I'm quitting today and I'm going to start my business. So to use everything at our disposal. So there's been a lot that's changed, and it's been changing, but everyone wants to grow and everyone wants to be sustainable. So there are businesses that have been only brick and mortar that now have had to shift. They've had to shift to online, and even if they're retail, they can shift online. And so I think one of the big things is that businesses had gotten comfortable, even if they were successful, they had gotten comfortable with where they were. So any business, any entrepreneur needs to also look at, what else can I do? What is my hedge? What can I do to protect myself if X, Y, and Z happens? And of course we don't, obviously we have no idea what's going to be coming down the pipe. We don't know, as to your point, we don't know how long COVID is going to be around. We don't know if COVID is only the beginning of what's going to happen, if there's something else that's going to happen. So, one of the things that I always tell businesses is, you don't prepare for a crisis when you're in the middle of a crisis, you prepare before. So that if something happens, you got a plan in place. So, okay, this happened, so now I do this, this, and this. Building up your reserves. But there are many people, Black and brown people in particular, that want to start businesses, but they don't know how. They know that they're working now, they're not happy with the way things are done, or a lot of times any employee may see things that just don't line up with their integrity, the things that they believe. And they're like, well, man, if I had this, I would do things completely different. And so use the resources that you have while you're in your job so that you can build your own source of income. And then once you get a source of income, begin to diversify. So not only do I have this business, but I invest, got housing, houses and things like that as well. So I want to always, my goal is to have 7 streams of income, 7 streams of income, so that if one goes down, I'm protected here and here. For the future, though, it's not a bad time to start a business. If you have cash reserves right now, if you had money that was set up, it's a great time to buy things at a discount. It's a great time to buy housing at a discount. It's a great time to buy some businesses that are going out and liquidating and doing different things. So we need every Black and brown person that is out here needs to be thinking more proactively and more future mindset. How can I build something? When anything is down, there's always people that are making money at it. And the only way you can do that is either have access to capital, access to loans, or just have a storehouse of funds that you can access to take advantage of.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for that. We only have a few more minutes, but I want to share something with you. I started my own little diversity company, and I prefer to call it an inclusion company, but I started my company. And one of the things I created, I took a page out of this subscription handbook, and I want to tell you about this so that you can share it with your community and you might consider it yourself. So I copyrighted 4 digital subscriptions. So, if you are an Amazon fan, you can get t-shirts, flowers, anything delivered on a subscription service. And one of the things I think businesses should think about is how to use the technologies that are out there to promote their business. So a digital subscription may not be for you. It may not be the way you do, but a digital subscription literally is exactly what it says. You get your subscription remotely or digitally or virtually, whatever term you want to use. So what services can you provide to people digitally? And thinking about this, because probably there's a good chance we'll get our hands around COVID and we'll go back to some sense of normality at some point. But what services can you offer to people that will withstand the onset of health, social, whatever it is, and you can still grow with your example of 7 streams of income. How can you make your company remain viable and sustainable for you and your family and the communities that you serve? So that's just one thing I just want to share. So we have about 5 minutes. I want to give you the remaining amount of time to cover anything that I did not mention or we did not cover in our conversation. So please, anything else you wish to say?
I'm sure. Well, I really appreciate this opportunity. I'm always looking for ways to connect with people and to grow, particularly Black and Brown people. How can we help one another? I specifically look for contractors that are in our community. You know, I'm not ashamed of that because I think that we are starting from a place that we are trying to catch up in many ways. And so I will take a chance on someone that is just starting out, just to give them the opportunity to get into the space. And then we also need to be connectors and leverage our relationships and help one another. And it happens in other communities, and I'm not always convinced that it happens to the way that it should in our community. Exactly. And so I try to do that as well. But what I can provide any business that's out there. I can provide strategies and then also execution of maybe most people are not doing as many yellow pages ads and that kind of thing as they used to, but maybe they log on to Facebook and they say they're seeing their competitor on Facebook and they're trying to be like, man, maybe you're a realtor out there and you're like, man, how can I take advantage of this? I see company X, company Y on here. How can I take advantage of that? In this time when everything seems to be dropping off or reducing, like my business, I can help you get to the place where you are still growing in this season. There's digital campaigns, social media campaigns, putting things in place, even email. It may sound, if you're like anyone else out there, you may be getting hundreds and hundreds of emails a day.
Way too many.
Just way too many. But it's still an effective tool, depending on your business, depending on how you do that. And so I help businesses digitally right now to set up a way to drive business and using a website or a particular tool as a hub. Think of a wheel. So the hub of that wheel, and I'll just pick on a regular website for example, you use your website as the central place that you're driving everything. If you've got Facebook ads, it drives to the website. You got Instagram, it drives to the website. You got a blog, it goes there. If it's an email, it all goes towards the hub. So you got one particular hub where all of that information is. So I help to write compelling content to get you on the first page or second page of Google, so that when someone is out there searching for your business, whatever it may be, there are ways to navigate that, to have you pop up. It's not, let's say you're a real estate agent and you want to get out there. If you just type realtor in your web browser right now, you're going to get millions of views. But if you realtors in Cleveland, Ohio, for lower income people, so you target specific, what's called a long tail keyword. And then you begin to drive traffic towards that. So people and it helps to qualify that you're not doing a shotgun approach with your business, but you're going specifically for these people. And those people are qualified. The longer the description that they're searching for, the more targeted it is to what you're doing. So if I just say realtor, who knows what you might get. But if you make it more specific with your blog content, your Facebook ads, your posts that you do, there's ways to actually generate everything that you would want to do. So it's possible to grow even in a downtime and make yourself more sustainable. You just have to have a strategy, and that's what I specialize in, is helping a business strategize, get placement, get on radio, get on TV, leverage their social media channels, and grow.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for chatting with me today. I appreciate this very much. I will send you a link once the video converts. Please watch it and let me know if I may upload it.
Oh, absolutely. And I really appreciate it. And I hope we can talk again.
Absolutely. Thank you again so much. I appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good rest of your Sunday.
You too.